What's up, Buffalo Bills fans? Here to do a little season review video, also free agency in-house and outside free agents. A little bit of Bills news this week. Zay Jones shoulder surgery, as we know. Um, Definitely, that was confirmed. Really explains a lot about his lack of production. I mean, there's a number of factors that play into that. Had that knee slash ankle in the Jets game, but still trying to play wide receiver with a torn labrum, or any sport with a torn labrum, is difficult. And now, looking back on his season, like I said in a prior video, him really not extending for balls, his catch radius seemed extremely hindered, and this now explains a lot. David Culley, quarterback coach, his contract is up. Age, maybe he doesn't renew. New offensive coordinator coming in. Um, we'll see where it goes. Um, Guys that have worked with Daboll in the past. George Godsey has experience as a quarterback coach in New England and in Houston. Uh, Jim Bob Cooter was a QC on the KC staff where Daboll was the OC. So now he was the quarterback coach for Detroit before he was elevated to offensive coordinator. Their head coaching position is pretty much sewed up with Bob Patricia, or I'm sorry, Matt Patricia, if you will. And he don't know where he's going to go, but he has ties with Daboll, as does Nick Sinceri. He's a Jamestown native, so he's got some Western New York ties. Been wide receivers coach, was on the staff with Daboll also in a prior stop. So, yeah, we'll see where all this ends up going. A lot of this stuff ends up getting sorted out at the Senior Bowl, which is going to really go full bore at the beginning of next week for those fan bases like ours that are not still in the playoffs, and 28 teams are not in the playoffs. So, yeah, it's pretty much where our focus is at this point. Fortunately, quarterback the Bills have shown interest in in Rudolph is not going to be in the Senior Bowl with a sprained foot. That's tough because I really wanted to see him throw. I wanted to hear about his throwing. See how he's still going to measure an interview, which is huge. That's huge to me. But I really wanted to hear what the guys on the ground saw with his throwing and his velocity and stuff. So again, it's a little bit of a hit, but that's a lot of quarterbacks. They have 8 quarterbacks. It's hard to get reps for all those quarterbacks, and in game, it's a guy, or it's a weird game. It shouldn't hurt. There's that saying where an all-star game shouldn't hurt you. It can only elevate you, but you know, in a court of public opinion, it's going to do one or the other. It's never going to not do one and do the other. There's always going to be a little bit of both. So, on to the season that was in 2017. I put out a word that I thought that this season was cleansing. I thought it was cleansing for both the fan base, the organization, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of ins and outs. Uh, in terms of the roster, the just the in-house was just there was a lot more turnover than we thought. I mean, we've gone over this. I've gone over this with was the nutritionist, the PR guy. There was other things that had gone on within the building that were just completely streamlined, changed up, and particularly the treatment of outside media was a lot better, a lot more welcome at One Bills Drive instead of an attack-like atmosphere, an outsider, them against us type atmosphere that had been fostered there for so long. And the season started off well. It's always the playoffs, and then the trades of certain guys coming in, going out. It was like, oh, where are they going? You see Watkins, you see Darby, and you start to see a little bit of the direction. Okay, this team wants to maybe take a step back, to take a step forward, add some assets. Said it many times, this regime was given bare bones resources both in cap and in draft, and they were able to really cobble together and a decent yield Their draft class is exceptional so far. I know it's just a year in, but they got contributions from everybody in the draft class. They really did a really good job, and that's what this team needs to do if they're going to get better. They need to keep adding the quality, both with the responsible spending in free agency, no crazy irresponsible contracts like the Charles Clay contract, things like that, and just continue to hit on your drafts. That's where it's all about, and not just in the first. You need to get that third guy, that fourth guy. You need it. Those are just as, when you hit on those guys, that is massive. That is massive. But and so the season plays out. There's no Watkins, there's no Darby, there's the EJ Gaines of the world. There's all these new parts, and so we're kind of like, how does this go? Open up the season, and it's funny how the first two games wrote the script for the entire season. That, looking back on the season, stood out to me like a sore thumb. First game, Bills run the football exceptionally well, generate 2 turnovers, do a really good job on defense. There was a couple of possessions where the Jets might have been able to take the lead. Bills got to stop, then forced 2 straight turnovers, won the game 21-12 at home against the Jets. So that was the template already being set of how this team needed to win games. They needed to run the football well, not turn over themselves. They did turn it over in the red zone, the Clay interception, which, again, this team, it's funny how foreboding this whole was, because those goal line shortcomings continued to happen right up into Jacksonville. It was just like, I look back, I was like, wow, you could really have just wrote the script for the first 2 games for the entire 17 season. Next week, boom, there it is. Bills don't run the football well. They don't generate any turnovers on defense. One time down in the I don't even know if they made it into the red zone. They might have. Had to have to look back really well, but it was just, they get down there and they don't punch it in. They're not able to extend the drive. They have to settle for a field goal. And then it's the miss hit to Zay seals the game. And there's a game right there. They score that touchdown, and kick that extra point. They win the game. And that was a frustrating thing. And again, very foreboding, foreshadowing of what we were going to see of the rest of the season, when this team just could not punch the ball in the end zone way too many times. 4 games all season. Well, the majority of those quarterbacked by Tyrod Taylor, had the jump, just the whatever touchdown by Nate Peterman late in the Saints game. That's unacceptable, completely unacceptable. And the next 2 games, again, they run the football decently. They don't turn it over. They generate turnovers. They win. Weird game in Cincinnati where they generate turnovers. They just cannot punch the ball in the end zone. They cannot put that key drive together. 16-20 loss. Team is 3-2 going into the bye. A very frustrating game, because it's a game you felt like if you just could have got that one drive, it was on the plate to be had, and instead you could be going in with a 4-2 bye. And that's, again, the type of game that always seems to have kept the Bills from the playoffs in the past, and it will if they don't rectify the offense. 2 home games coming up, and the same kind of game. Tampa Bay, Raiders. Bills run the football exceptionally well, create a ton of turnovers, only 1 turnover themselves, and they win their biggest margin of victory for the year amongst those 2 games. In the Raiders, and I'm sorry I didn't mention the Atlanta game, considered the biggest road victory in the Bills' last 20 years, I would say, against the defending NFC champions. Some great plays in that game, a lot of hustle plays, effort plays. Zay Jones scoop and score. EJ Gaines forcing a fumble that they didn't get to recover, but still he had hurt himself on that play, and he still managed to force fumble. Deion Dawkins falling on a ball that Tolbert fumbles as the Bills are going to, I think they eventually settle for a field goal there. So a lot of just really high effort plays. Jordan Matthews breaks his thumb in that game. It's funny. Ramon Umber hurt his thumb in that game, so crazy. Then here it comes. After the Raiders game, the dip in the season, the proverbial 3-game skid for the Bills, where the template is all the same. They don't run the football well. They got some junk yards in the Chargers. They turn over the football 10 times in those games offensively and only generate 1 turnover defensively. And they get mauled in the run game. Gave up tons of offensive yards. I've seen it. I saw enough of. I had Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram in my sleep. That ball going off at DeMarco's hands in the Chargers game was just the sign of things to come in that game. It was just a mess. The Peterman decision game, and they end up going back to Tyrod. They felt like their offense had been so limited and hindered passing-wise that they needed to make that change. And it ended up, they ended up being the butt of a joke nationally. Then they go into a place where they absolutely needed to win, and a game where traditionally the Bills season, it dies on the vine. It never, the Bills always find the way to lose that KC game, and it was always, whether it was in New Era or whether it was in Kansas City, the Bills would find a way to lose, and that would be, okay, this team's not making the playoffs. Instead, the Bills grind it out, seal it up with a turnover. No turnovers themselves, didn't run. I mean, offensively, very pedestrian. It was a 16-10 win. KC looked like they were driving potentially at the end of the game. And Trey White almost takes it back for a pick six. It would have been nice. Would have padded the stats a little bit. Would have looked nice on his stat sheet and a little bit nicer on the scoreboard. But again, you take the win. You calm things down. Where the season looked like it was on a tailspin. They were 6-5 at that point, and you're like, okay, let's try to relax, because next week got New England at home. And again, this is something that I'm going to talk about in this video till I'm blue in the face. Going forward with this team, this is going to be a big thing for me about the way this team plays New England. This team in particular, but I'm going to get to that later. Again, typical New England game, no offense to speak of. The damn goal line. Again, here it comes. Bills drive, take a ton of time off the clock. Look like they're going to go take a 7-0 lead. They get down 1st and goal. First play, Tyrod interception to a guy who was formerly on the Bills. Cups of coffee on the practice squad and on the active roster, Eric Lee. And it just, gut punch. And you knew the game was over. It was almost like that play, the game was over. Held it Pats down pretty well. I think the halftime score was only 9-3. And they went in and scored a touchdown, made it 16-3, and it was over. You knew the game was over. It was like, and it shouldn't be over. Your offense should be able to respond. And like so many times in certain games, it went dormant, and they lose the game at home to go to 6-6, 3-23. They generate a turnover in that game. The game is going to be most well known for the Gronk cheap shot, which is just still, to me, as appalling as a thing as I've ever seen, and still can't fathom how he only got one game. And the games, again, the snow game, the following game, that's the game I'll always know it as a snow game. Colts in New Era, crazy game. The only game of the year where the Bills won where they didn't generate a turnover, and they turned the ball over multiple times that game. The Tolbert fumble, the Joe Webb interception, Peterman gets concussed in that game. Crazy game. Webb comes in, throws a pick, doesn't hurt him. Get the PAT on the goal line to save the game on the offense. End up getting the ball in OT, and Shady saves us and spares us the anxiety of waiting for Hauschka, watching Hauschka line up for a field goal in that weather, and puts it away. The long pass from Webb to Deontay Thompson will always be another play remembered. Crazy game. Peterman played decently in that game when he was in. threw that nice touchdown drive before the half to ended up going to Kelvin Benjamin. So, and just a crazy game for the Bills to go to 7-6. Then they have Miami at home. Again, it's a typical Bills game. They run the football solidly, throw the ball a little bit better in that game, don't turn it over, and weird game. Dolphins coming off that Pats win. I think it was on Sunday night or Monday, and Jay Cutler goes into sleepwalk mode, throws 3 lazy interceptions. The last one to seal the game to Trey White. They look like they might have been driving, and Bills in that game, as in later on in the year, give up a sloppy onside kick, and just so many times that things repeated themselves with this team this year, and they got to get this cleaned up going forward. An important game to win because they were going into Foxborough, and similar theme, Bills seemingly get a touchdown pass. That'll always be a theme, a story in that game. It'll always go back. Is that, Kelvin Benjamin changes the complete tone of the game if the Bills get that touchdown instead of settling for 3, and you're able to, I believe it was, I don't know if it was to tie or take the lead, but it was a huge. You're taking 4 points off the board, and it was just a ridiculous call, and the Bills end up, again, not many things in that game stood out to me other than that particular play, because I felt like it was just Bills didn't particularly run the ball well in that game. Gave up a lot of rushing yards in that game. Gave up a lot of rushing yards in the first Pats game, to be quite honest with you. Got a turnover though, which was but again, could not punch the ball into the end zone offensively. The Jordan Poyer pick 6, but you got to score touchdowns in the NFL. Your offense can't score field goals. You can't score 3 points, 9 points offensively. You got to score touchdowns, and that was the 4th game. Ended up being the 5th, I believe, that there ended up being 5 that they didn't score an offensive touchdown. That is unacceptable. That is absolutely unacceptable. And now, last game of the year, the Bills played 2. We were playing 2 games. We're the only team in the history of the league that played 2 games, I think, in one day. It was that game. Of course, I felt confident. I don't know about the rest of you. There were probably some, because we always wait for that other shoe to drop. It's like, okay, this is what's going to happen. They need to win. They're either going to go into Miami, shit the bed, and lose to a team that's, highly motivated and wants to keep the Bills out of the playoffs, or they go in, beat Miami, and nothing that they need happens, or it just ends up getting ripped from them somehow. Again, Bills win. Okay, got a little hairy at the end. Fails, ends up throwing a pick to Poyer to seal it. Crazy, strange game. Kyle scores a touchdown. Looks like it might be a little bit of a curtain call, but hopefully it's not that, because he's a guy I do want back. And then, waiting for that Cincinnati game that ended up coming to pass and working in the Bills' favor will always be a memory that'll last. It's indelibly etched in our brains forever, and finally a great memory to have as a Bills fan. Bills go to the playoffs and go right back to week 2. That whole goal line sequence, here we go, that theme, goal line sequence. The Bills run pass option ends up getting thrown to Kelvin Benjamin, flagged for offensive pass interference, and it was just like, they're not scoring a touchdown. They're not scoring a touchdown, and that ended up happening. And then the game turns on what? Jags get kind of that cheap 3 off of Blake Bortles' run or scramble at the end of the half to tie it. Then they convert their 4th down and they win the game 10-3. And that game is just, that was another playoff game on the platter. And then finally, nationally, people start to raise their eyebrows about Tyrod Taylor's inability to throw the football, and it just made me pound my head against the wall. And I was like, this is why I've been a very, very I've been very critical of him, and it was on full display. But that's the season. The Bills finally break the 17-year shitter of not being in the playoffs, and that's why I'm going to segue into. It's going to go right into, for me, it's going to be, this finally gives a coach some breathing space, some room to implement what he wants to do even longer term than what he had initially planned, because getting this albatross off the organization, both for the coaches, the players, and the people, just everyone in that facility, it's just a million-pound anvil that is gone, because that's always been the question, to whether it was new players coming in, players maybe returning, coaches coming in, whether it was coordinators, head coaches, and there's been a turnstile of them, as we know. It's always been the question, how do you finally, and that's gone. Now the question is, how are you going to go get this team back in the playoffs? But that takes a totally different tenor, and it gives him time. It doesn't start that proverbial clock of, oh, we didn't get this team to the playoffs year one, he's got to do it year two. And then if that doesn't happen year two, it's like, okay, year three, it's like it ends up being make or break. And then you're constantly doing that turnstile again with the coaches, and you never can get anything built like that. You just can't. The message changes, the scheme, it's maddening. So that's one of the biggest, the most important byproduct of this whole thing, is it gives a head coach and a general manager legitimate time to finally foster and let something that they want to build germinate there for once. Now, go into in-house and outside free agents. I'll just do a little quick rundown of this. It's not going to be too long-winded. Guys that I fully want them to keep: Kyle Williams, get him back maybe on a 1-2 year, less than $8 million, obviously. Maybe the 1 year with a second-year option, whether it's a player option or a team option. I think he still has a lot in the tank, and provided they get more young talent at that position, in particular some bigger bodies that can help him, just spell him a little bit, take some of the heat off him, free him up more for some one-on-ones, take a lot of, you take a lot less pounding. I'm all for it, and what he brings to the room, it's beyond reproach. So he's definitely, I think, a must-be back. Leonard Johnson played very well in that nickel role, played very well, is familiar with both McDermott and Frazier. Solid guy. The one INT that he didn't get in that Jets game, maybe it changes that game a little bit, will always stick in my craw, but still played solid, as did the whole secondary. So for me, you could bring him back. EJ Gaines, a lot of people with the injuries are going to be like, do you or don't you? But it's not debatable that this guy was not money when he was on the field, that the secondary was not only good, but even better with him there, and pairing him with Trey White, provided he's healthy. Maybe he can get these soft tissue injuries figured out. I would like to see him back, because I think, if they can get those soft tissue injuries rectified. The guy played very, very well, very high level. You didn't know he was on the field unless he was making a play. He played extremely well, and with White and Gaines, that's what we thought we were supposed to be getting with Gilmore and Darby. These guys were just so even keel, so on it, and did everything that you'd want from a pair of cornerbacks. Definitely a must keep. A guy like a Preston Brown, to me, I think his time's come and gone in Buffalo. His tackles always seem to come 3-5 yards down the field. It's never making big impact plays, and this is a defense we know that linebackers, it's a premium playmaking position, especially that middle linebacker, and I think they also want to get more athletic there. Same goes for Mo Number, kind of a jag, just a guy that they can been passed up by a younger player like Matt Milano. Some other nondescript guys, Jordan Matthews. I'm sorry, it's probably, he's a one-off for the Bills. Bunch of injuries, not much else there. Maybe bring a guy like Joe Webb back, versatile guy, special teams, can play receiver, emergency quarterback, familiar with the, McDermott's comfortable with them. Probably could be back on a 1 year. Deontay Thompson came in, led all Bills wide receivers in receiving yards, because mainly he was most healthy. their best deep threats, and maybe he's a guy that they bring back on a 1 year solid guy. Um, maybe he can slide down to that fourth or fifth receiver role, and we'll see. Everybody else is kind of provided Cadet's healthy, he has a diverse skill set. Maybe they bring him back for a 1 year, but the rest of the guys, Colt Anderson, he's his time's come and gone. He's always injured. Seantrell Henderson, maybe he's back as a swing tackle, but for me, he could go either way. It wouldn't affect me. Taiwan Jones, same thing. Brandon Tate's interesting. He was like 5th in the league in punt return average at 9.6, 5th or 6th. Solid guy. And they may want to get a little more younger, more dynamic. You saw them try to go that way with Keelan Clay, but he was a little shaky returning punts, so they went right back to Tate, and Clay ended up getting cut to help facilitate the Benjamin trade. Tolbert, I'm sure all Bills fans probably want to see the guy go on. It's not because he's a bad guy or anything. It's just I don't think he lobbied for all those carries. He was just kind of a victim of circumstance. Sharice Wright, another guy, they could, he could go. Jag, just a guy, older at corner, probably want to get younger there also, particularly more athletic at every position. Leads me to outside free agents now. Outside free agents, to me, earmarked a couple of guys I feel fit the Bills very, very well. And they need to hit on these types too, the responsible spending guys that get good, solid contracts, but you're not, again, bending over backwards in terms of just handing out money. And these guys are going to help you. Bo Allen, defensive tackle for the Eagles, I feel like he's perfect. Big body guy, plays in a 4-3 defense, can help free up the rest of the D-line, can plug, take on blocks, allow Kyle to operate more one-on-one. Same with the edge guys. I think he would be perfect, as well as whatever young bodies that they bring in there. That would be, I think, would be great. Maybe they can get something out of Adolphus Washington. Maybe they move on, who knows. But this is strictly about outside, and I think he would be a fit for what the Bills would like to do in terms of just getting a guy in that's not going to break the bank, but he can help knit together that defensive line, help free up linebackers too, taking on blocks as well. Which leads me to a linebacker, Anthony Hitchens, free agent for Dallas, plays all over that linebacking core. Versatile guy, Iowa guy, probably has some crossover with Micah Hyde. 3-down linebacker, can cover, can run, hits, sound tackler. I think he would take a jump in a McDermott scheme. I think he's a very good player, solid player, but I think his play would elevate even more in a defense like this that highlights its linebackers, and he would get to play in a full-time role and not be kind of somewhat of a rotational guy like he's been in Dallas. Unless Lee was hurt, they're trying to work in Jalen Smith, so I think he's a guy that would be perfect in this defense, and a guy I don't think you'd have to pay a big yield for. But that's pretty much it, and wanted to finish up on this. Going forward, the way this team plays, the benchmark in all of football really, but unfortunately for the Bills and the other division teams, the Patriots, but the Bills in particular, because I can say that the other two teams, the Jets and the Patriots, the Dolphins, they've been up against it sometimes way worse than the Bills have, and they've played the Patriots consistently over these years much better than the Bills have. It's like the Bills play the Patriots and it's capitulation. Before the ball's kicked off, it's like it's in their heads, whether it's the building, it's like this team is already lost before they've played, and I fucking hate that. That has got to change. You know what? You go there and play them tough, and just don't look like it's just a concession. And I don't see that come from the Dolphins. I don't see that come from the Jets. I see the Jets. They give the Pats a hell of a game. Sometimes they win, and if not, the Pats know they've been in a game. Dolphins too. Shit. When the Pats go to Miami, there's a good chance they might lose. They do not have a good record down there, and they They go through a lot to win down there. The Dolphins always play them very, very well. So you see their play elevates, whereas the Bills takes a precipitous drop. The Bills could be playing well. You put the Pats on the schedule, and it's like boom, crap. You get the Jets, the Dolphins. They could be playing. Put the Pats on their play goes up against them. It just really irritates me. And the way the Bills play the Patriots is something I'm gonna be like, I don't want to have to always think those are 2 automatic losses. That has to change. That has to change. Period. That cannot, and that's the only way that the Bills are going to elevate, because it's like then you get the Dolphins and who are already holding up their end of the bargain, the Dolphins and Jets. The Bills need to do that too. That's why you're not conceding the division to this team and only playing 16 other teams for 2 playoff spots, which are wild card spots, which means you're begging to either go on the road. You're going to go on the road. Hope it sucks. So they can no longer just capitulate to them. They just can't do it. In order for me to really see that there's a stance from some other things, that's to me that's a step. How they play that team, that's a step forward. I want to in a certain manner the way they play the Patriots. But all right, Bills fans, it's Thursday, 1 day away from end of the week. You have a great one. Take care. Let me know what you guys think. The guys I've earmarked, I think that would fit the Bills. Guys that I feel like they should keep in free agency, and guys I feel like they shouldn't. I don't think there'd probably be much. Just maybe there's some people who want to move on from certain guys that I'd rather them keep. But it's always good to have differences of opinion. But you guys, thank you so much. Had a little bit of a talk with a guy who's viewed my videos forever on here, and I really I beyond appreciate that, because for anybody to watch these and think about anything I say with any sense of reverence is huge for me, and I don't take it lightly. But if I don't get back to you in short order, or sometimes I take a mental note and say, oh, I'm going to write this guy back, tweet this guy back, and I fucking get. And then when you follow me on Twitter, I'll follow you back. That way, just inbox me. It's a lot easier to inbox me than it is to tweet me sometimes, because my timeline will get, like all of ours does, gets cluttered up with shit. And sometimes I'll follow somebody or a team or whatever, and I'll just mute them because I don't want to see their timeline. But I don't do that to just people. I do that to like big entities or something like that. All right, guys, have a great rest of the week. Take care. Go Bills. Senior Bowl coming up. Let me know what you guys think and how you feel, but mostly about this video and the content in it in terms of the season review, the free agents, and how McDermott winning now buys him and the organization time to really build something tangible. Take care, Bills fans.